Now let's move on to the news that I think a large section, based on the retweets on the tweet from BuckeyeHuddle.com, the news that a lot of Ohio State fans were waiting for quite a while. There is a change in the Ohio State coaching staff coming for the special teams unit. Parker Fleming out. He will not be back for his final season of his contract going into 2024. That opens up another spot on the Ohio State coaching staff. Not really a surprise, Kevin. This is news that, first of all, the sort of initial leak late last week from Football Scoop said, yeah, there's probably going to be a change on the special teams unit, which he did. There's only one guy on the special teams unit, so that makes that a pretty easy piece of math to do with or without your shoes on. It doesn't, I don't think this is a big surprise. It does feel like this is something that just needed to do, a change that needed to be made so that we could, Ohio State could potentially balance that coaching staff out a little bit, bringing on another defensive coach potentially.
Yeah, and we'll get to the super chat in a minute, a very important super chat from super poster Jordan Kapler, because 24 to hell with Orr. Yeah, it was very, I think it was a move that needed to be made on so many different levels. Special teams was not good. I made a post, I think, on the Huddle board saying that if special teams were uncoached, we probably would have had about the same results. And I know maybe that's a little harsh, but the special teams results were not very good this year. And it gives you the opportunity, as Tom had mentioned, to rebalance your staff, get maybe the right people into the right roles, and kind of get on with your lives. And I think that's going to be important for the Buckeyes with some of the other changes that have been rumored or whatever may be as Ohio State retools and gets ready for 24 with a certainly much more bolstered roster of veteran players. And we'll see, we'll see what's in the card for coaches.
Tom, you mentioned the retweets. I hope Parker Fleming does not look at Twitter to that tweet from Buckeye Huddle and look at the quote tweets and the replies. A lot of celebrating going on the internet when that news broke, and but it was time. It kind of had to happen.
Well, I think there were a couple different elements to the why this was a change that a lot of people were sort of anticipating was going to happen, and why people were maybe relatively happy to see it happen. One is a lot of teams don't have a dedicated special teams coach. And if you have a dedicated special teams coach, you would certainly expect to see something pretty remarkable out of the special teams. If you're the guy who's in charge of just this one thing, basically, yeah, he worked a little with the secondary too, but he was the special teams coordinator. If you were the special teams coordinator and some teams don't have a special teams coordinator, you would expect, if you're going to dedicate that resource and that staff position, because the number of accountable assistants is capped at 10. Those are the guys who can go on the road and recruit. So if you're going to dedicate one of those to be a special teams coach, you would expect to see something remarkable out of the special teams at least every once in a while. And it felt like every time you noticed the Ohio State special teams, it was, oops, we ran the wrong fake punt. Oops, we ran a fake punt where we weren't supposed to. Oops, our returner fair caught the ball on the 5. Oops, we missed another field goal. Oops, it was just oops, I did it again in a remix that no one was asking for. So that, I think, is part of the conversation. The other part, obviously, that you want to balance the staff, where they had 5 of the accountable assistants on the offensive side of the ball, plus a head coach on the offensive side of the ball, 1 guy on special teams, and then 4 assistants on the defensive side of the ball. So it was really kind of like 5.5, 4, and 1. That is not a formation that is going to work in soccer. It is not a formation that is going to work really particularly well in college football. They seem like they may be on track to rectify that a little bit, because as they announced that Parker Fleming was no longer going to be a member of the staff, they also announced that Matt Guerrieri is going to be back as a member of the staff. Tony, he has worked, 7 years prior with Jim Knowles at a couple different stops, including Duke. He actually was a QC guy at Ohio State a couple years ago, before very briefly being the Manny Diaz stay at Temple kind of stay as a defensive coordinator under Kevin Wilson at Tulsa, before then being the co-DC at Indiana. Before then, Tom Allen and crew got all were let go at the end of the season. This feels like, we talk a lot about alignment. This feels like a hire where, okay, if you have Matt Guerrieri running your safety room, and he's worked with Jim Knowles for 7 years, and Jim Knowles presumably played a significant role in bringing him back, it feels like you maybe have your alignment sorted out, at least on that front.
Yeah, one of his guys knows his defense, knows what he wants to do. A guy that Jim Knowles obviously trusts. And while the Ohio State safeties were very good this year, I don't think they were very good in 2022. I think Ronnie Hickman dipped, and that's why it's kind of so surprising he's playing so well in Cleveland right now, is because you didn't expect that based on what we saw from him last year. Lathan Ransom, Josh Proctor had injuries and things like that, but both of those guys were outstanding this year. Sonny Styles was very good. So I thought the safeties were a pretty big surprise this year, and I think a lot of that credit obviously goes to Perry Eliano. But when we talked to Ryan Day, was it signing day, when talking about the assistant coaches, what's the number one thing they need to do? And I think he said recruit. And that's something that Perry Eliano struggled with in landing the top guys. Ohio State could get visits. They just couldn't get the guys signed in terms of the 5 stars. And so I think all that finally came home to roost. But, we have no idea, can Matt Guerrieri recruit? He's been at Duke for most of his career. And as you said, Indiana this past year. Hard to judge what a guy does at those two places. So we'll see. Younger guy will be able to relate to the players, as they say. But, that's – I guess you get a couple of years to find out. Is this going to be a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal? Most assistant coaches don't get beyond 2 years in terms of their contract. So you got to put up or shut up pretty quickly.
And so now you have Matt Guerrieri in. He obviously sliding in for the Perry Eliano spot as the safeties coach. With Parker Fleming gone, now there is another open spot on the coaching staff available for someone. And I think all year we sort of assumed, okay, Parker Fleming out, James Laurinaitis in, bing, bang, boom, nice, easy one-for-one swap. And now you're sort of hearing, Kevin, this may be a not-so-fast-my-friend situation. A lot of smoke around the fact that James Laurinaitis may stay as a GA for another year, a graduate assistant, not be one of those 10 countable coaches. And there has been also a lot of smoke around one particular name, a rather big name, defensive line coach, who seems like maybe there might be some kind of a plan in the works for potentially some kind of a transition whenever Larry Johnson decides to hang him up. So what have you heard on that you can share?
Yes, definitely. I'll do that. And then we'll get to after we comment on that, we'll get to the super chat of Jordan Kapler. Certainly a name that's been thrown around is Jason Taylor, the former NFL player who's currently the D-line coach at the University of Miami, Florida, not Ohio. And there seems to be some genuine interest there. Ohio State has definitely bent his ear. I have talked to sources on both sides of things there, and everybody is telling me that there is very real conversation going on, and this would be a position of where you come in and be in like some sort of co-position with Larry, and you are the future. You are going to be the guy that it's going to be handed off to. You will then have the continuity that is necessary in recruiting. Maybe that helps bridge some of the things that have happened with losses of guys like Dylan Stewart and Marquise Lightfoot and Justin Scott, and then going back a year, Keon Keeley, and maybe another bite at that apple, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there, because once names start to rise to the surface to that point that I can get multiple people to talk to me, and then off the record again, but not burning any sources here by talking about this, it seems that a lot of the due diligence has been done, and this is something that's either going to be thumbs up or thumbs down in relatively short order, in my opinion. Now, are we going to get another news dump day on Thursday or Friday like we had today? The part of me that doesn't like to work says, I sure hope not. The part of me that likes to stay employed says, yes, let's get another one of those. I'm fine doing 6 shows in a day. But it'll be interesting to see for that.
Well, I think a lot of people associate Jason Taylor with his time with the Miami Dolphins as a pro. In college, he was an Akron Zip, and I think he's a Western Pennsylvania guy, if I remember correctly. So coming to the Midwest would not be a complete unknown. It wouldn't be a completely random move for him to be, if he did end up coming up to Ohio State. And you think about all the different guys that Miami has sort of poached from Ohio State over the last few cycles, guys who Ohio State either thought they were going to get or who Ohio State was maybe leading for, or Ohio State was maybe had committed at one point, who then ended up down at Miami. You wonder if Jason Taylor makes a trip from Miami to Columbus, maybe you get some guys down there rethinking some decisions and maybe you get a player or two out of it as well.